The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. Christian Bale sat behind the wheel of a rented Land Rover, mud splattered across the windows, staring up at the lonely cottage tucked into the mist-covered hills of Braemar, Scotland. He wasn't running from scandal or a film gone wrong, just silence. After wrapping a brutal psychological thriller, Christian had found himself haunted by the role, the lines still echoing when he closed his eyes. The cottage had been recommended by an old friend, a recluse from the industry. No signal, no neighbors, just sheep and ghosts, he'd said with a smirk. Perfect. Christian stepped inside, greeted by the groan of floorboards and the damp scent of old stone. The living room was sparsely furnished, wool blankets, an iron stove, and shelves of books with cracked spines. The caretaker had left tea and firewood, but little else. No TV, no internet, just what he needed. The second night, a storm knocked out the power. Christian wandered the house by flashlight, looking for extra blankets when he noticed a draft beneath the stairwell. Curious, he pried open a narrow door he hadn't noticed before. A staircase, narrow and wooden, spiraled upward into the attic. The air changed as he climbed, colder, thicker. The attic was cloaked in shadows, cobwebs strung like lace across exposed beams. In the far corner, beneath a dusty canvas, something leaned against the wall. Christian lifted the cloth. It was a painting, cracked, faded, but striking. A young boy, no older than 10, sat in a velvet chair, a book open on his lap. His eyes, dark and solemn, seemed to follow Christian as he moved. At the base of the frame, barely legible, was a brass plaque, Ewan, 1974. Behind the portrait, he found a shoebox filled with old cassette tapes, dozens of them, each labeled in a careful child's handwriting. Dream to 1, Dream to 2, For Mum, When I Flemme, The Scary Man, and finally, last one. Curiosity piqued, Christian dusted off an old player sitting nearby and inserted the first tape. The voice was soft, fragile, a Scottish accent, boyish and earnest. Today I dreamed I could fly, not with wings but with stars in my shoes. Christian sat in the dark, listening for hours, one tape after another, his mind weaving images from the boy's vivid dreams. They were stories, half fantasy, half sorrow. The boy spoke of a sickbed, of doctors, of wanting to be a pilot. One phrase repeated often, "If Mom ever hears this, tell her I tried to wait." Christian stopped the tape. He stared back at the boy in the painting, and something inside him shifted. He wasn't just escaping anymore. He had stumbled into someone else's unfinished story, and he needed to know how it ended. Christian awoke to a sound, soft, mechanical, rhythmic. Click, whir, stop. The old cassette player had turned itself back on. Still wrapped in a blanket, he climbed the attic stairs again, flashlight in hand. The air felt colder this morning, heavier with the scent of mildew and something faintly floral, like dried lavender. The boy's portrait loomed at the far wall. The boy's eyes locked in eternal study, his book forever open to a page Christian could never quite see clearly. The tape playing now was labeled "Dush When I Fly." Mum says I might get better if I'm brave, but I think she's crying in the kitchen when she thinks I can't hear. That's why I try to dream louder, so she hears the good bits. Christian sat on the attic floor, surrounded by tapes like a shrine to someone half forgotten. The boy's voice painted vivid pictures, paper airplanes taped to the ceiling, a pillow fortress named Skyport Ewan, dreams where clouds whispered secrets and the moon waited like a runway light. Sometimes I dream the pilot looks like my dad, but I don't know what my dad looks like, so maybe I just dream he looks like me. That line broke something in Christian. He had a son himself, Joseph, 12 now, living with his mother most of the year in LA. The demands of acting had made him a frequent flyer in name only, always coming and going, never present long enough to truly land. Listening to this little boy alone in the Scottish Highlands made Christian wonder how many stories Joseph had told in the dark, waiting for his father to come home. That afternoon, Christian drove into the village, a narrow line of cottages, 2 pubs, and a bakery where the scent of treacle and fresh oatcakes fought the cold. He found the local library, a stone building with green shutters and a rusted weather vane. Inside, he asked the elderly librarian, Mrs. McAllister, about the cottage. Her eyes narrowed when he mentioned the name Ewan. "Oh, you found the tapes, didn't you?" she whispered. "Poor lad, a real quiet one, always sketching or talking to himself. That house kept too many ghosts after his mum passed." "She died? Cancer," she said softly. "When Ewan was 8, he went to live with an uncle. Nobody knows what happened after. The uncle moved away in the 80s. The cottage sat empty for decades." Christian leaned in. "No one ever came looking for the boy's things? The portrait, the tapes?" The librarian hesitated, eyes softening. "We're a small place. People forget easy when forgetting feels kinder. Back at the cottage, Christian climbed into the attic and opened the final tape. It was labeled simply, "Last one." But it wasn't the boy's voice this time. It was a woman. "To whoever finds this, please tell you and I'm sorry. I couldn't stay. I wanted to. I did. But the pain." Christian froze. "I left the tapes to keep him dreaming. So he'd remember the sky was bigger than our little world. If he's still out there, tell him I loved him more than life. Tell him he was already flying." The message ended in then in silence. Christian's throat tightened. He stood and walked to the window. The sky had opened, sunlight piercing through gray like a promise. He wasn't ready to stop listening, not yet. 3 days passed. Christian didn't leave the cottage again. He stayed in the attic. He didn't rehearse lines or take calls from his agent. He didn't even look at the script he had once claimed would revive his career. Instead, he sifted through the remnants of a forgotten life. Tape reels, broken crayons, yellowed notebook pages full of hand-drawn aircraft and imaginary flight maps. On the wall beside the boy's portrait, he taped up every eye drawing he found, slowly rebuilding what felt like a sacred mural of imagination. It was like watching Ewan return to life, piece by piece, through pencil scratches and scotch tape. One morning, Christian found something he hadn't noticed before, beneath the loose floorboards near the old trunk. A flattened cardboard box sealed with brittle masking tape. He opened it carefully. Inside, wrapped in wool scarves and old newspaper, lay a small, hand-built model airplane. Not plastic, wood, handmade, intricate, like something carved by a child and guided by a parent's hand. The wings were painted blue, though chipped. On the tail were 2 letters, EB, Ewan Blackwood. Tucked under the model was one last cassette, unlabeled. Christian slid it into the player and hit play. A pause, then the boy's voice, fainter than before, slower. "Mum's been gone 5 days. The social lady says someone's coming tomorrow to take me to Uncle Alec. He's got a garden. I hope there's room to fly. If you find this and if you hear me, I want to say thank you. I think that means you cared enough to listen. That means everything. I believe people become stars when they disappear. Not famous stars, the quiet ones. The kind that shine just enough for someone else to find their way home." The tape clicked. Christian closed his eyes. It felt like a prayer had ended. That night, a storm rolled in over the moors. Thunder echoed like distant drumming. But Christian wasn't afraid. He stayed in the attic, candles lit, the model plane resting on the windowsill beside him. He spoke out loud, not to the boy, but to the part of himself that had gone quiet over the years. "I wasn't there when I should have been," he said. "For my own son, for myself." The wind howled, the candle flickered. Maybe it's not too late. Back in London a week later, Christian contacted his team. Not about press tours, not about the film. He wanted to speak with a foundation that worked with foster youth. He made arrangements to legally acquire the property in the Highlands, not to vacation in, but to preserve, as a storytelling retreat for kids who'd lost too much, dreamed too little. He called it Ewan's Skyport. At the launch ceremony 6 months later, Christian gave no press interview, but he did hand each child a blank cassette and an old-school tape recorder. "Your voice matters," he told them. "Someone someday will want to hear your story. Maybe they're already listening." Years passed. One morning, Christian received a letter forwarded by the local council. It was from a man in Canada. "My name is Ewan Blackwood. I was placed in foster care in 1984. I didn't know my mother left tapes. I didn't know she said goodbye. But I saw what you did. I heard my own voice in that attic. Because of you. Thank you for giving me back a piece of my childhood. My daughter sleeps with that plane on her nightstand now. She dreams big." Christian folded the letter and stared out the window. The sky stretched endless above him, wide, waiting, and full of light. What would you do if a forgotten voice from the past spoke directly to your soul? If this story moved you, help us keep telling human stories that matter. Comment your thoughts about Jonah's journey, or share a time when a forgotten object brought back powerful memories. Like the video of Christian Bale's emotional transformation touched your heart. Subscribe to uncover more powerful, celebrity-driven stories of redemption, mystery, and compassion. And remember, sometimes the quietest voices echo the loudest, if we choose to listen.